Today, we have the honor of speaking with Ted Rath, who is the Vice President of Player Performance at the Philadelphia Eagles. Ted is going to share some insights on what one of the best NFL teams in the league focus on throughout the season. Now, being a critical role player for a professional sports team takes more than a smile and a can-do attitude. The role players we are talking about aren't just the players on the field, because we know the support staff around a team are almost as important as the stars on the field. Listen in for all the details on how you can make an impact from the experience and the insights of our inspirational guest today. All right, here, Sport Fuels Life, we're here with Ted Rath. We're so excited to have you on. Thanks so much for joining us. Performance at the Philadelphia Eagles, right? You are the VP for sports performance. Talk about what that means really for our listeners.
Yeah, no, first of all, thank you for the time. Humbled and honored to be here, Scott. Really appreciate the opportunity. First and foremost, performance. If you look at it from a global scale, as you know from an Olympic level athlete, Scott, you can go into it and basically throw everything into the bucket of performance, from nutrition, from massage therapy to recovery, to travel strategies, to strength and conditioning, sports science at our level. There's so many different buckets. So it's a lot of that. There's crossover within our personalized nutrition plans. So our executive chefs and chefs that we have designed just to do personal meal plans for a lot of our players. So things like that are the things that kind of grow into the extenuating. But I think some of the things that people don't always recognize when we go to an international game, for instance, there's a lot of strategy that goes into play with that to maximize performance, whether it's adjusting a circadian rhythm several time zones, as you know, from traveling worldwide, whether it's a nutritional plan going into that, whether it's a sleep plan leading into that travel day, or trying to maximize 2 West Coast trips by maybe staying on the West Coast to save from some sleep, to save from some travel fatigue, and maximize getting our circadian rhythm on one time zone for a couple of weeks in a row. So there's a lot of things that go into performance, Scott. I think you could throw almost anything within the world of sport into the performance bucket.
And you've been in the NFL, correct me if I'm wrong, over 11 or 12 years now?
Year 16,
You're
yep, this year.
16, absolutely. You're 16. And what was that road like for you getting into the NFL in sports performance, specifically football? Was that something you always wanted to do? Was it something that you knew you were going to go into, or did something else kind of push you towards that direction?
Yeah, I love the question. First of all, a lot of luck, as you would imagine. I think anyone that gets to a high level position, there's luck involved. We got to be honest about that. Have I worked my butt off? Yes. Long story short, there was never a desire when I got into strength and conditioning. It was through developing a love when I went to college to play football and then really getting exposed. I actually started in physical therapy from a scholastic standpoint for my education. And then I saw our college strength coach at the time, his name is Steve Murray, he's still at the University of Toledo, fell in love with what he was doing and seeing firsthand that, oh man, this is a real profession. This is an actual lifeline where I can have a career in this. And at that point, it's nowhere near where it is today, Scott. So that's kind of a cool aspect to it. But as I saw that, I said, okay, well, maybe this is something I would consider. I've always known I want to be around athletics. I wanted to be around training or physical based something. That's why physical therapy stuck out to me. And then I slowly started to see that that was probably a more logical career path. So as I approached the end of my college playing career, I became a graduate assistant. There were a couple high school stops there. I was trying to buy time, but I got a GA position basically right out of it. Got very lucky there. And I got promoted after year one to a full-time position at Toledo. After that full-time year, then I got a opportunity to go to the Detroit Lions. And it kind of, once again, got lucky because it was an opportunity at the time that kind of came through Steve Murray again, who had worked with the head strength coach of the Detroit Lions. His name was Jason Arapoff at that point, and they knew each other. He said, hey, I have a position. It's basically part-time. It's not going to pay much. There's kind of this 1,000-hour rule thing. So I said, well, this is an opportunity to get in the NFL. It was my hometown team. I grew up in southeastern Michigan. So for me, Scott, it was an easy decision. Getting my now wife on board, she was all about it because we left a full-time position with healthcare benefits, all that stuff, making at that time, I thought, a huge salary and taking us restricted earnings. And through that first year, I actually maxed out my hours through like the off season. So by the time training camp hit, I didn't get a paycheck from the Lions from, I think it was July all the way through February until I got promoted there to a full-time position. So a lot of luck, some sacrifice. I was making ends meet by starting another high school strength and conditioning program just to make a little extra money on the side. to support, pay bills, and things like that. But outside of that, once again, there's a lot of luck involved. And then when luck meets hard work and opportunity, you can typically do some pretty cool things.
No, I love that answer. One, because it's humble, but two, because you guarantee your success through opportunity and work. It's not just who you know and how you know, because clearly, you went through the University of Toledo. That doesn't mean that someone's just going to say, "Hey, I'm going to put you in for the job." You probably had to show your stuff. You had to work hard for it, and you have to give that personal recommendation from your boss as something that's absolutely serious. And so that makes a big difference. I joke around. I tell my athletes, like, my boss now, who hired me as the first time ever, actually watched me compete in high school, and so it's kind of cool to see those scenarios play out and make a difference.
For
Um,
sure.
so sports performance, physical therapy, obviously sport has fueled your life with both passion and excitement to help others. Let's talk a little bit about what it is that helping others prepare for sports does fuel your life and why that fills your cup.
Yeah, I think you start, once again, great question. You start with what drives you. So for me, Scott, like if I look at my core values, it's based on a few things. It's based on faith, it's based on love, empathy, consistency, and then gratitude. So as I go through that, all those things are shaped around people. So we always hear this. It's a people business. That's a people business. Sports is a people, it's a people life. You have to be in it to help other people because the greatest team sport in the world is life. My greatest team is my family. It's not the football team that I work for. It's not anything else. It's my family because I live by this order: faith, family, then football. So as I started to think about that, why physical therapy originally attracted me was I get to help people going through injuries. I've gone through injuries. I know you've gone through injuries, Scott. You're talking, Megan's going through an injury right now. So you guys go through these things. You need someone who's going to approach you with an empathetic ear. You need someone who's also going to push you and hold you accountable in a loving manner. And I think oftentimes we forget about that. Some people just stay on one side, and you can be really rough, hard-nosed, and accountable. But at times you also have to approach certain athletes a little bit differently, maybe with a little bit more of a bent ear, an empathetic ear. So knowing and using awareness and emotional intelligence to know when to push, when to pull back, how to interact with certain players in a certain way. I think that's always drawn me to that, the psychology of dealing with athletes and learning how to motivate them. One of my favorite things about coaching or just working in athletics, Scott, is finding the why. It's finding my buddy Ben Newman, who's a podcaster, he's author, he's a huge coach, he does awesome things, but he calls it his burn. How do you find your athlete's burn? Like it goes beyond your why, because if there's something that's so strong within you and it's burning, this burning desire, there's nothing that will stop you from achieving your goals. So for me, that's what I want to find. I want to find my athletes' burn. I want to find what their deep-rooted desire is. If it's a legacy for their children, if it's buying a house for their mom, their grandmother, let's tap into that. I'm going to bring that up when we're going through really uncomfortable workouts or you're in the middle of a funk because you had a couple bad games. I'm going to use that so that we can remind you of why we're working and why we're putting in that path to success.
Yeah, it's truly just a great reminder. It's always beyond this rep or this workout. It's always beyond okay, let's just try and win this game. It goes internal, that intrinsic motivation and the focus of, okay, I'm putting the work in because of X, Y, and Z. And so that's a wonderful point. I love the insights that you've developed, and you've got such a clear message of understanding this. And I'm sure it's so easy for you to help those people who are understanding or trying to learn their lessons and trying to learn what their purpose is, because you found a path that works for you and has worked for so many other athletes.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, so head sports performance coach for one of the best teams in the NFL. Can you dive into your role for these players, both as their career and their growth on and off the field? I mean, we're talking about NCAA athletes, or I mean, they all probably played in college, and now they're professional. They're the top league in the world, and they're on one of the best teams in the world historically in the past 2 years, specifically 3 years. And so it's like, what is your impact? Go into that a little bit. Obviously we've got all the daily training, we've got the planning out for the preseason, the during the season, and everything. But what's your impact for their growth and their careers?
I love the same thing. Great question, Scott. I think the thing that I think about first when you ask that is where I'm at now. I'm working with elite level athletes, which is awesome. It's amazing. But what I do on a daily basis is grounded in my foundation because I've worked with high school age athletics. I've worked with collegiate athletes. I've worked with so many different sports when I was at the University of Toledo, from volleyball to track and field to swimming and diving. You learn about the anatomical structure of the human body. You learn about the shoulder through volleyball or through overhand throwing sports. You learn about ankles and lower extremities through basketball or some of the track and field sports. You learn about so many different things. I call on all that gain knowledge now when I'm dealing with elite level athletes at the NFL level. But the cool thing, it's what we just talked about, tapping in to finding out what our players' why is, because I firmly believe that it's mind, body, and soul as we go into this. If I just coach the athletes physiologically, that's one thing, because as I go about this, I do care orthopedically. What I love about getting my foundation in high school sports and coaching at the high school level for a while, that taught me how to be a better coach. Because if I can cue and teach a ninth grade student athlete how to hip hinge appropriately, number one, I know that I just helped them develop a lifelong skill that's hopefully going to make that better chance that they don't have low back pain and don't experience discomfort at some point in their life. That's really important to me. So if I can coach that high school athlete really well, will give me an elite level athlete, and I'm probably going to be able to cue from so many different angles from my background, Scott, that I will find a way to get that athlete something to sink in. And then from the spiritual side, I mean, I've had some of the deepest conversations about my personal faith. I'm a Christian. A lot of people, players are, some aren't. I've had very deep spiritual conversations with people from all walks of life with different religious beliefs or whatever it is. The thing I love the most is because the sport of football and all sports bring together people from all walks of life, Scott. So, man, like from a psychological standpoint, I've learned so much about human nature, about people, about what drives and motivates people. So when I look at my role, when I look at the role of any performance coach, performance director, strength coach, whatever we're talking about, our role expands vastly beyond coaching reps, coaching sets, and coaching technique within the weight room. It goes into life, because some of my closest friends now are players that I've had or people that I've worked with in this profession, and that sets the tone for the rest of my life. So for me, it only scratches the surface when you start talking about sets, reps. This is a people thing. And if you're developing people, if you care about people, most likely you're going to be pretty successful in this career path.
No, it's just so refreshing to hear. I mean, you think about some coaches all about the win-loss record, and they, to me, they miss the cue. Just like you said, when you care about the people more and you care about what they're going through and how you can help them achieve their goals, all of a sudden that win tally starts going up. And it's mostly not just from buy-in, but from the belief that somebody cares about them. And so I guess, so you have this mentality. You've been with the Eagles now for a while. How does that, is that congruent with the culture at the Eagles?
Yeah, I think it has to be, because when you're selecting, I guess I would start with this, whether you're a high school athlete, a collegiate athlete, a coach, a longtime coach, I think you have to look at congruency, because I love that word and I love the fact you used it. To me, congruence is when you pair your passion with a skill set. So for me, I decided to leave the Los Angeles Rams when I came here. And my thought process was, there was a lot of things that went into that decision. Obviously, it's a difficult decision to move your family cross country, but it was set in, all right, is there alignment here? And is this a championship level culture? But am I still going to be able to be me? Because I think oftentimes you look at, some people will take jobs for all sorts of reasons, Scott. Some people it's financially driven, some people it's geographically, whatever the decision is. But for me, you have to make sure that there's an alignment there. And when there's not, it's probably not going to be a long-term solution. That's okay. You have to be honest. For me, I have to look at myself in the mirror every night and make sure I'm being honest with myself. Is this situation, location, job, whatever, and I'm talking to anyone from any industry, any business, is this in alignment with making me develop into a better person? Is this in alignment with me becoming a better person? So I think as you look at it, there has to be alignment between you as a person, because your core values shouldn't change. If your core values personally are changing all the time, then you probably got to reassess them and make sure those are in alignment with who you're trying to become. So I think those things all have to be there for you to be in a successful situation where the team, you personally, everyone kind of wins and grows together.
So you mentioned core values quite a bit, and Megan and I have gone through core values with herself, and one of our former podcast members was Sean Swarner, and he mentioned he climbed the 7 tallest mountains in the 7 different continents around the world, and he mentioned core values being so pivotal. Explain to our listeners, I guess, one, when you found and started to utilize core values for yourself, and how you would encourage a coach or an athlete to understand theirs or teach core values to somebody else.
Yeah, I've been really fortunate. There's a couple guys in my life. Ryan Hawk is one. He's an author. He's a podcaster. Ryan's awesome. He has a podcast called Learning Leader Show, and it's phenomenal. And I've gotten to know him and a guy that he knows or associated with, who I met through Ryan, Brooke Cups. Brooke Cups is a genius. He's a high school basketball coach in Ohio. He's won state championships. His son plays at University of Indiana now, but he teaches leadership-based courses at the high school. And one of the foundational things that he does is set core values. So for me, Scott, when I wrote mine and found the importance, and once again, I'll use the word congruence, to align the passions in my life to where I'm making sure I'm making the right decisions professionally and everything else that are in alignment with who I want to become. And I'm setting a tone for the legacy of my children to see how I interact and what my beliefs are and seeing those things. So for me, core values are extremely important. I wish I could have went back and written them in my high school years, because truth be told, Scott, and you're probably the same, you and your wife, Megan, your core values won't change much as you go through life. Can they be fluid? Yes, absolutely. I've went through a couple different things where you make slight adjustments, but the core of me should remain the same. And the funny thing is, I see that working with teams. The teams that I've seen that establish a clear identity and a clear culture based on values, and they don't constantly switch messages and keep going back and forth, those teams that are steady, that are consistent within those core values, are typically the teams that I've seen rise to a championship level.
Yeah, no, it's a wonderful understanding of that, and I think people should identify them at a younger age as soon as they can, and they can ultimately direct their not just purpose in sports, but honestly finding out who they're going to be and whether it is in sports or whether it does go into a different career, just like you mentioned. So, um, let me ask a question about specific NFL players when they come in from college.
Mhm.
Um, can you give an example of some athletes who get it right away, or an example of some who maybe it takes a little bit longer to get it? You know, the NFL, it's pretty hardcore, right? You're talking about the best leagues, or sorry, best teams in the country, best players in the world, and you're talking about that 1%. So when somebody comes in, how do you identify and how do you learn to identify somebody who may be missing a core value and someone who already has it?
I love that. Yeah, because the interesting thing that we get, Scott, is people, number one, from a wide range of backgrounds. One of our starting left tackle is from Australia, so didn't even grow up in the culture of the United States. He's 6'8" and 380 pounds. So we could go down a rabbit hole of the physiological differences between him and other players on our team that are literally 160 pounds. So you look at the variation mentally and psychologically, it's the same thing. The variation of what you're getting from a person, some are very, very mature. I've had 20-year-olds who are some of the most mature people that I've ever met in my life. I've had 35-year-olds that are still not quite mature, that are still, in their later years of their career. But the cool thing is I got to find a way, number one, to get both of them to trust me. Both of those very unique individual people, they got to trust me. I got to develop that. That comes with me being humble. That comes with me being consistent. I got to be vulnerable at times. I have to give them my trust first before I ever expect it. So I got to go through those things. Once we've done that, then we can start filtering through and having those organic conversations that tend to get a little bit deeper. And then I can find, once again, their burn, their why, their passions. And then I can tie those into, hey, have you written core values? I know you say this, but you say this is your passion, but you're making these decisions that don't align with that. So maybe we need to reevaluate that. And then you can start to challenge them in some ways. And I expect the same thing back to me, Scott. No one is above being coached, certainly not me. I can get coached way more than anyone else in the building because I have more people and more eyeballs coming at me. So I'm going to gain more knowledge. I'm going to gain a better understanding of me from the athletes, from fellow coaches, from everybody that I get to interact with. And that's a selfish way to look at it, but I think iron sharpens iron. We can all grow together. So for me, it's finding those pain points that maybe drive you, or those passion points, because we all have both in our lives, and then being able to dive in, and learn from those players. But it's got to come from a place of trust, and it's got to come from a foundation that's built on that trust.
Yeah, trust is huge. It's one of those things where if you don't have it, you can say the right thing or the wrong thing, and they're still not going to listen to you.
Yep.
So I really enjoy that point that you have there. You mentioned accountability. Obviously, trust is built first, understanding core values, and then the why. What are some things that you have in your experience, your life, in your team that allow people to feel safely accountable to others?
It's got to start from the leader, Scott. So it has to start. So accountability is one of our core values within our team, within our organization. That has to start. If that's going to truly be a core value, the head coach has to be accountable. The general manager has to be accountable. It has to stop at the highest level or start at the highest levels, excuse me. So if you're a high school team or a college team, it's got to start with the head coach, the athletic director. Everyone in a management, a leadership role has to be tied in. Otherwise, that core value is not a real core value. If you have someone in a leadership role that's ultimately not stepping up and they're making mistakes left and right and never owning them, then that's got to change. The core value has to change, or that person has to change, or the role that person's in has to change. So I think you look at it from that, it's got to start. So for me, what I've always tried to take accountability. If I'm going to say that I'm going to hold players accountable, I have to be willing to get up there and say when I make mistakes. The four most important words that a leader can say is, I messed that up. So as I go through it, if I misprogrammed, if I programmed a bad hamstring exercise, if I programmed something from a volume standpoint that was bad personally, or it was just a bad decision, I got to own it. The best thing that I can do is go own it. Don't hide from it, because if you're hiding, people are already going to have assumptions. Negativity is going to fill the void where the communication lacks. That's a John Gordon thing. If you're not communicating, negativity fills that void. So over communicate from a leadership standpoint. You have to. And then accountability, you do it first. The finger shouldn't point out here. The finger should always point back first. Once again, I said, you look at yourself in the mirror. At the end of the day, I have to be honest with myself. People can fool others. That it's not difficult, it's not easy, but there's actors out there that can put on a face and they can hide and they can say certain things and they could feel a very, very different way inside. For me, I have to be honest with myself, though. At the end of the day, I challenge everybody. Go home, look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, did I get better today? What actions did I put into play today that will help me become a better version of myself? Or what actions do I need to remove because they're not helping me? So I love saying this: do your habits of today align with your goals of tomorrow? Your habits have to lead to the future self that you want to become. If they don't, why would you anticipate that you're going to become that better future self?
Yeah, another great point there, and it just I hope our listeners understand that it's not a negative thing to learn how to hold yourself accountable. It's almost always a positive thing to be able to, one, be humble, but then two, see where you are and see where you want to go, and then take the steps to that location.
Yeah, Scott, one more point on that. Sorry to interrupt you, because as you were saying it, I was like, man, where did oh yeah, we were just in Orlando. So we had the first ever NFL Health and Safety Summit, where it was a collaborative group. We did it in conjunction with the owners' meetings. So it was all the disciplines that kind of work within player performance. I was fortunate. I got to help plan it. It was awesome. One of our keynote speakers was General Fenton. He is the standing commander of SOCOM. So all of special operations reports to General Fenton. He's got 70,000 troops. That's the Navy SEALs, the Army Rangers, the Green Beret. That's the elite of the elite that are serving our country right now. So this is a guy in one of the most important leadership roles in the country, and he talked about after action reviews and holding each other accountable. He said their culture is so strong that you can't even tell a guy when he did something wrong, because that person is already raising his hand and said, hey, I screwed this up. Here's how I'm going to fix it. Here's the steps I'm going to take, and here's how I'm going to get better. And this is the guy running all of our special forces. This is one of the most important people in our military. So from that standpoint, I was like, we're only in sports, Scott. I said, we're doing nothing compared to this guy. And number one, that's the greatest team in our country right now. So we better hope that they're in good hands leadership wise. And they're talking about, we can't hold each other accountable enough. We have to start with us. It's got to be. They're saying all the same things. Now, that is awesome. So sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to throw that in there because I thought that was really cool.
No, that truly is amazing, and we appreciate them for the service, knowing that they're also holding themselves accountable to a level that is unheard of on a regular day-to-day basis. And we're talking about sports. I've always thought that sports is a vessel to take you through whatever journey you want to go through, but then hopefully come out a better person on the other side, whether it's your personal sports journey or helping others along the way in their sports journey. It's just a vessel to help you become the better person you want to become. Yeah, that's a wonderful side note. So thanks for interrupting me. So Ted, specific leadership and developing culture. We've talked about accountability. We've talked about starting it from the top down. Say you're a brand new coach, you've never coached before, and you're starting to take over a team. What you want your team to be able to hold you accountable, but what's an exercise or a specific scenario that you could call out that you've seen a leader do or you've done yourself that really hit well with the athletes in the room?
Man, you're dialed in, Scott. I love these questions. I really do. I'm passionate about this, as you could probably tell. I'm high energy anyway, but I love talking leadership and culture. It was a time, I know you're not a huge football guy, but Sean McVay, who's the head coach of the LA Rams, I came in with Sean and was very fortunate to be on his initial staff. So we started working together. We were both randomly reading Extreme Ownership at the same time. It's a book by Jocko Willink. Once again, a military tie-in. Jocko was a Navy SEAL. He's got a great podcast as well. But from a leadership and ownership perspective, we read so many things that help drive our culture. That initial point, John Gordon actually helped with some of our culture messaging too. But as we went through that, we started talking about, all right, extreme ownership, it's got to start with us. That was the accountability piece. It's like, what else do we need to do? What are we missing? Because Sean had a plan. We all had a plan of how we were going to onboard and unload the culture. So number one, the first thing I would say from a reference is have a plan. It's insane, Scott. I actually went through, I was fortunate to be on our head coach hiring committee a few years ago when we hired Nick Sirianni. So I got to interview all the head coaches in the NFL, all the people that were vying for the jobs. And you talk about culture. These are some of the brightest minds in football, but making sure what set other people apart versus others, because they're all very smart from a football perspective and a sport perspective, was the plan for leadership and culture. So side note, just make sure you have a plan. If you're a head coach, even if you got the job and you still don't have a plan, make a plan right now. Do that. Have a plan for your culture, for your core values of your team, all those things. But getting back to Sean, what we talked about was, all right, well, we think we know what they need. We need to talk to the players. So he and I sat down, we pulled players into our office one-on-one, not just the leaders either, top to bottom, not just talking to, at that time, the starting quarterback or the defensive star, whoever it was, but we were talking to the other guys. We talked to Aaron Donald, Todd Gurley, Jared Goff, but then we talked to the backups and the guys that were bubble players, Scott, guys that might get cut that year, because we wanted to know, what do you need? What do you think this team needs? What do you need from a culture? And the funny thing, Scott, I remember vividly our best players, Aaron Donald, who may be one of the greatest ever playing defense in the NFL, just retired. So hats off to AD. He was one of the first ones. He said, we need more accountability. He said, we need you to hold us accountable. We as players need to hold each other accountable. We got to hold you guys accountable. We just kept talking about accountability. So we came up with a very simple system. Said, hey guys, we're not going to overload you with 50 rules. It's be on time, be respectful, show up and do the work. It's really as simple as that. We had other, like, you got to be within your weight range, your body weight range, things like that. But it was basically be on time. And if you weren't on time in the NFL, we can fine players financially. And that's what we did. We said, here's the standard. The standard is the standard, because the standard is what we allow. If you don't inspect what you expect, then don't tell me it's a standard that you have to be on time if you're letting guys slip left and right. So holding guys accountable, it was uncomfortable at first because we told them, we said, you asked for this and we believe in it too. But the first couple times it's going to be hard. And it was, but we all grew through it. We got better through it. And we developed a championship caliber culture because we grew and we developed that trust through being vulnerable together, through going through some of the highs and some of the lows, some of the tough times, but we had to talk through them. So I love that. You got to develop the culture, but have a plan and then talk about it.
Yeah. The hard times is definitely something that every coach can think about, worry about. You've got this tough conversation coming up. How do you have it? How do you encourage someone who may be struggling to have that conversation or making that shift into having that conversation more regularly to change their team culture? Because they want the end result, but that process is a challenging process to take that first step or second step through. How do you encourage someone to get through that spot?
Embrace adversity. I think it's like David Goggins would say, the fact that you can go through and choose to do really difficult things every single day of your life, whether it's physically, emotionally, psychologically, choose to do hard things very often, and that's going to harden your mind. That's going to make you a tougher individual. So embrace adversity, because here's the fact in life. If you're not currently in the middle of a problem, you're probably either coming out of one or you're about to go into one. So Scott, if you have a great thing going on right now, that can be your problem. I've been on teams where we've won so much to where you start looking around, you're like, oh no, when's it going to break? What's going? And then you're screwing yourself in your mind because you're kind of using that as negativity. And then people get real tight and then they get fearful. They don't want to make a mistake. No, you got to play loose and you have to embrace the adversity, whether it's positive adversity or negative adversity. Another quick story. We had a player one time, I was in Miami, And it was our backup quarterback. Our starting quarterback got injured and he had to step up into the starting role. It's extremely stressful, as you can imagine. The most important player on the field, it takes hours and hours of meetings just to get that week's game plan in. Well, his name's Matt Moore. Matty was also having a baby that week. It was literally due that week. So Matty has to live at the facility basically to absorb all the game planning, and we're changing things left and right to adapt to him as a quarterback instead of the other guy, Ryan Tannehill, who was injured at the time. Matty's having a baby. He's not going to miss the birth of his child, so he's there. He's stressed. He's zooming. He's trying to get meetings as he's going. That was positive adversity because he just got an opportunity to start. He just had a new healthy baby. Those are great things in life. That's positive adversity. I could list 1,000 negative adversity examples also. We've all been through them. But I think recognizing it is step one, and then you have to make a decision. Make up your mind that you're going to embrace the adversity. Don't be afraid of it. Don't run away from it. Don't be shy. Take that thing on and say, I'm going to take everything that you got, and then I'm going to be better on the other side because of that.
Yeah, make up your mind. That's a key point for sure. The adversity is always there, the opportunity to go through that. And we have such small adversities in real life. We're very fortunate here in America. So the adversity that we have to face in sports and in those scenarios, it is new stress. And a quote from the Duke women's basketball coach actually is handle hard better. You know,
Ooh, yep.
and so every time you get something new or every time you've gone through a little bit and things get easier, she says, well, it gets easier now, but guess what happens when you can handle it? You get more,
Yes.
right? There's
Yep.
there's that next problem. So that's a wonderful analogy. The cycle is, okay, if you're not in a problem, you're out of a problem, but the next one's on its way, or you're going to create one. And so that's a wonderful mentality. What are some habits you have, one, to stay on this mindset that you've created as a natural habit? How do you do this on a day-to-day basis to reinforce your positive habits that have led you to such a successful career?
No, thanks for the question. And I love the term habits. It's James Clear wrote a phenomenal book, Atomic Habits. There's a lot of great books out there. That's one that comes to mind right now. Your habits will determine what your future outcomes are. There's no doubt about that. So me personally, some of my habits, I try to wake up early every day. The first win of the day is one of the most important ones, Scott. So do not hit snooze. Your first win of the day is not hitting snooze. If you did, it's a loss. So now what do? You have to give yourself a little bit of grace, but tomorrow you better not hit that snooze button. So I challenge guys with this. I stole this from someone. Everything's stolen. We all steal everything. Everything I say has been stolen from someone. So it's the toe test. And it's one of the first things. How fast can you get out of bed? Number one, don't ever hit snooze. Don't even think about it. And then how fast can bam, your feet hit the ground. And it scares the crap out of my wife sometimes, but how quickly you can get out of bed is going to set the tone for your day. And then for me personally, I get down and pray. There's a lot to be thankful for. Once again, whether you're in the midst of adversity, there are people out there praying for your problems that you think are problems you're going through right now. So being humble and trying to remain from a spiritual standpoint, close connected to God, that's very important to me. And then it's all about getting myself right. So I got to physically work out. I need to mentally read. For me, I try to read if it's a strength training day, I'm going to get that done and then I'm going to maximize that. But then as I'm doing cardio for that day, I'm going to read. So I still love books. I can't read on tablets. It's just a weird thing. I like books and then I'll take notes in my phone. So I read while I do that. Once I'm done with that, Scott, then I feel like I've checked off the box. All right, growth mindset done. I got better already. I've already accomplished things before the sun comes up that most people aren't going to accomplish in this entire day. So for me, it's that little bit of psychological edge of I've done more than you, and that's the competitive spirit in me. But I have people like that drive me, that do more than me. I'm like, man, it makes me mad that you're doing more than me. So I'm going to do more than you tomorrow. So I think it's important we have those healthy competitions within our life, but then pushing yourself to get better. Once I've done that, then I feel like I can pour into the buckets of everyone else. I can help the people I'm talking to, the athletes I'm coaching, the other people that I'm helping, and whatever's going on. I feel like once I've taken care of myself, now I can devote everything I have and pour into my family at home, the people at work, whoever I have to help that day.
Taking care of yourself is something I'm still learning.
We
I
all are.
yeah, I think that's a great note. I've started to beat my snooze button. I've started to wake up without an alarm. Sometimes it's a
Nice.
little frustrating, but I'm like, hey, I'm up. Time to get the day going. So, but taking care of yourself so that you can better help others. What's something, I guess, burnout is an issue that a lot of coaches, players, athletes, parents, anybody can experience. Examples of someone you know or yourself that has gone through burnout, didn't know how to deal with it, didn't know it was happening. Then it was identified, found a way through it, made it to the other side, learning through the failure, learning through the burnout, learning through the habits, and creating something better. What's something you've got to just share with our listeners?
Yeah, burnout's real. You hit it on the head. Burnout is something we all deal with. I personally deal with it every season because the grind of an NFL season is a grind. So getting through it to the end, have I shifted subtle things that I do daily? Yes. I sleep in when I can. It's important that we get up early, and I got to go through the process that I just described, my daily habits. But when I'm able to sleep in, Scott, you better believe I'm going to try to sleep in, because we know from a physiological standpoint how important adequate sleep is to health. There's 1,000 great books on sleep. Read them, because it's clearly important for the longevity that we all hope to have. So for me, it's about maximizing that. Schedule time for yourself. These are things that I'm still working through, like trying to get better at scheduling intentional time. That word intentional doesn't get used enough. Don't just schedule time and not be present. Intentional scheduling is when you are present. Be where your feet are. So if I'm scheduling a date night with my wife, I better be present. Don't be on my phone the whole time. Set my phone down. Talk to Robin. Have a great catch up about what's going on in her life. Ask questions. I think none of us ask enough questions. As we go through, how do you become a super communicator? You have to ask detailed questions, and then you have to ask with the reason being to understand, not to respond. So as you ask a question, just like you and I are doing right now, Scott, I have my notepad here. I see you scribbling stuff. I'm asking questions and we're learning. And this is the beautiful thing about every interaction. Anytime you're talking to another person, you have an opportunity to gain knowledge and gain understanding about that person. How awesome is that? What else do you want out of life? I mean, what are other driving factors? If you can go through life and not care about anyone else, you're a sociopath. Like for me, I want to get to know other people and how I can potentially help them, and also how they can help me. Because once again, iron sharpens iron. We can all grow together. If you have an abundance mindset, not a scarcity mindset, the world has plenty to offer all of us. Make sure that we're going about attacking, helping, because you have to help. And once you do, this is the selfish part. When you help other people, you feel better yourself. So I think those are the cool things you have to go through with that. I know I went off topic on a little tandem there, but for me, it's important. I think communication, asking questions, doing it for the right reasons, those are really, really important qualities.
And then let's go to the athlete side of things with the burnout. So that we'll bring it back to the idea of burnout. Say an athlete goes through it, you've gone through it, I've gone through it, and then the focus of, do you want to keep doing it? And okay, if the answer is yes, how do you find that way out of a deep cycle of a burnout?
Yeah, convincing, I think, isn't a strong enough word. You have to find a way to get the athlete to believe that the rest is truly important. Because I've gone red in the face talking about the physiological benefits, and here's what sleep will do to you. Here's why we're going to deload you at this practice, but we're going to spike you up at this practice. I have gone through so many different ways of trying to get the understanding. And I think number one, you got to learn your athletes. We talked about that, know how to talk to each of them. But I need to find a way to get the athlete to truly believe it in their heart. I can't just tell them. I have to hopefully lead them through knowledge-based stuff and through research and whatever else I have, the tools available. But they ultimately have to make the decision. Once they make the decision, that's true buy-in. Buy-in's not me telling them and forcing them to do something. It's getting them to understand that maybe at some point you need this. Oh, bam. Then once I know I got that first notch, then I can start really going into the educational hole, Scott, and teaching and helping them learn about why it's important. And then if you're doing the right things, they're going to be able to feel and see their performance increase as they actually go through this. So for me, once you actually allow the deload, we'll call it a deload, once you allow that deload to come into your life where you can actually super compensate and then take your training, take your performance up higher to another level, you know all this, then you start to buy in and believe even more to a greater level. So once I get that first notch, I'm almost like a shark in water. It's smelling a little hint of blood. I'm like, I got him. Now we're going. So for me, I love that first little hint of, I think you might be onto something. Yep, here we go. Let's start talking.
No, that's a great point as well. Yeah, getting them to lose the edge a little bit and understand that there's a little bit more perspective and belief to what someone else is saying. It's almost like cracking the door open, and just like you said, you're the shark, you're going to attack it. So I love to hear that. Let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about the training. You've been working at the highest level of sports performance now for 16 years. You started through college. You were a football athlete yourself. What has developed? What has changed and adapted in the training principles that everybody could utilize?
Yeah, a big part of what's changed. Sports science has become obviously hugely involved. And once again, going back to training load management and tracking. So now bringing in technologies like force plates, like sleep data, like Omega Wave, all the way down to Aura Ring to 8 Sleep. There's so many different ways to track sleep and utilizing that to marry it to the athlete's training. What I think that's allowed us to do, Scott, is individualize things to such a more detailed level that now we can really get targeted training for each individual player. And for our level, there's a lot of modifications with a lot of our players. As you can imagine, a number of them have gone through multiple surgeries. Once again, we have guys that are in year 13, 14, 15, and then guys that are 20-year-old rookies that are relatively healthy and they're good to go. So you got to mold the training to compensate for both of those sides. So I think that's ultimately important. But as we go through this, training itself, I don't want to say hasn't changed because I do think, once again, the technology, velocity-based training has helped us get such targeted work in specific velocity bands that now I feel confident when we're in a true power block. I can tell you that we're in a power block because I can show you objective numbers and data that back that up. So for me, it's allowed that targeted training and that targeted planning to be a little bit better, or maybe just a little bit closer to the bullseye than it was before we had all this technology to give us the objective data to reinforce the decisions we were making.
Yeah, objective data is it's undeniable one, which helps build the belief and the building blocks of that belief system. So, when coach says, "Hey, you're supposed to feel this," and then you do feel that, and then here's the proof, you should be moving this. It's like it's double. I lost my term. Double validation, right?
Yes.
And so it's like, oh, I'm doing what my coach says. Oh, here's the proof, and it's not just a delayed gratification of those results. It's that double validation right there. So but that's wonderful to hear. So such a variety. I mean, you're in charge of the entire team sports performance, nutrition, sleep, training, everything you've got a hand in. You've got multiple different positions on the roster, right? We've got running backs, wide receivers, linemen, defensive backs, quarterbacks. Explain some of the differences. It may seem obvious, but like preseason training. I'm used to track and field terms in the fall, but preseason training to in-season training to postseason, right? When you talk about the playoffs, do they all follow a similar cycle with small critiques, and what are some of those major differences in those positions?
Yeah, I would say there's small critiques at certain times. Like for me, I'll term our off-season training is when we have the full team in this time of year. So we have 90 guys on our roster. We're training them all. We're going through a few-week progression until we're basically in full-blown football practice. So we have to train them more similar to what we would in season at some point in the off-season because they have to be prepared to go through full-speed football practice and remain injury resilient. So off-season to in-season training, there's some subtle differences, obviously, because workload and everything else is going up in season when we put pads on. Now there's contact trauma. There's other things that get introduced that we have to account for from a recovery and regeneration standpoint. But I would say a big difference for us, the immediate off season. So when the season ends, we term that basically early off season. Everyone go away for a couple weeks, get rest, get recovered. For me, it's about the joints, the connective tissue. It's about recovering and giving adequate time so that we can let those things heal. Because if we did it right and we went to the Super Bowl, that was a 7-month season. There's no time off in the middle. Your body is getting wrecked on a weekly basis if you're playing, and we have to regenerate you and try to get you as close back to 100% for the next competition. So by the end of the year, you are tore down, especially if you're a player who's 35 years old. So as I'm training that player, I'm training them specifically different versus the young players who are still in a really good place joint-wise orthopedically. We're bringing in BFR, we're bringing in blood flow restriction training, we're putting that in and tying that into some specific protocols that we utilize. But then as we transition that early offseason, we start with a lot of static stuff. We start with things that are going to put the joints back into a good position because as we progress back into our offseason, then we're going to start doing ballistic movements. We're going to start with plyo progressions. We're going to start with high-speed running. We're going to start with cutting, change of direction. deceleration work and progression. All those things are going to come in. So we have to take care of the joints and train the connective tissue to be ready to take on those increased demands and rigors as we approach the off season. And then as we approach the in season, we have to transition into, all right, football shape. Are we in football shape? Have we trained the anaerobic system appropriately? Can this athlete go through 4 quarters of a football game while carrying 15 pounds of additional equipment, while taking contact? So did we develop the body shock absorbers? Are they big and strong and resilient enough? And can they perform? Can they run? Can they jump? Can they do the things that they have to do while fully weighted and having a 300-pounder shove on them? So there's definitely intricacies that we have to change throughout the course of the year, Scott. But the big one is the off season, making sure we get those players back to 100% so that we can truly train them in a progressive format throughout the off season as we get ready for spring football.
That sings massive songs to my ears right there. You talked about ISOs and static lifts. What are some of your? I mean, there's basic just a wall sit, but what are some of your isometric and static lifts that you think really have made a difference in the past 10 years for joint regeneration? Because a lot of people doing explosive movement sports, that's almost every single sport. So
Yeah.
that's a key topic I definitely got to hit on there.
No, I love it. Now, you mentioned wall sits. Obviously, you can progress them. But once again, I think single leg work is so important and will address lower extremities. So you're looking at the knee joints, the ankle joints, the hips. You're looking at everything from a lower extremity standpoint. Those are really key indicators of how athletically functional a player is going to be at the NFL level, because that's your moneymaker. You got to be able to run. You got to be able to set. You got to be able to block, tackle. All those things involve the lower extremities. So for me, as we look at it, putting them in single leg positions, knowing the athlete first and foremost, what's this specific athlete's injury history? All right, all right, patellar tendonitis, we have to address that. We better tackle that before we ever get to the offseason and we start trying to think that we can even jump with this athlete. So for me, it's attacking that in single leg positions, changing multiple angles, putting them into a position where we are holding, whether for time or we're adding load. Once again, incorporating BFR. I think BFR is one of the most amazing things that we've added into training over the last several years. And I've seen unbelievable results, really, especially for some of our veterans too. That's where I've seen a lot of the money being made, because those veterans were extending careers now. We're helping their joints last just a little bit longer. That's an additional contract. That's an additional 15, $20 million. That's a huge deal for that person's family, for their generational wealth. That's awesome. Like, that motivates me to help those guys get a little bit longer along their career. So those are some of the things that we address. Upper body wise, not as indicative because we're not going through as much trauma. Certain positions we have to address the shoulder. That's an important complex for us, specifically with our throwers, but also our defensive backs, who are typically the guys that are on the smaller side, but they take on big contacts because they have to make tackles. So clearing up tackle efficiency and things like that, but training the shoulders so they can be a shock absorber as well.
Unreal. Love the insights. Love that concept of handling one, each individual's concern, and then finding out two, how to elongate their careers, because I think we all want to play sports as long as we can, and we don't want to be just that guy at the Y that used to play basketball and then now I can't anymore. So
No doubt.
yeah. So a couple more things. Average career for a football player, right? You talk high school, you might get a shot at college, and sometimes some guys are the best guys on their team. Then they go to the NFL 1 to 3 years. Sometimes, as you say, you're talking about a 12, 15-year veteran. Some specific names definitely stand out, but what's the average career span?
It's roughly, I think it's just below 3 years for an NFL player. So at this point, it's just under 3 years.
And what do you think sets the difference between those that make it beyond average or below average?
Great question, because I tell every rookie this. As they come in, I said, hey, find the veterans in your room, the guys that have been playing 8, 9, 10, 11 years. Start to follow that guy around. Start to ask questions. I've been very fortunate with some guy. I've worked with a number of Hall of Famers. Like Calvin Johnson is a guy that comes to mind. Calvin Johnson is one of the greatest wide receivers ever to play the game. And Calvin, you don't have a nickname like Megatron without being awesome. So Calvin was phenomenal because Calvin was one of the most consistent athletes I've ever been around. So for me, another thing that I love to say, consistency is the truest measurement of performance. If you want to show me a guy that's probably going to have a long-term NFL career, show me the most consistent player in that room. And then when those players also equate, they have tremendous talent, they all have talent, but when you match that with incredibly consistent habits, I'm going to show you a player that's probably going to have a really long, successful career. So that consistency pattern, doing the little things, being coachable. Coachability is one of the greatest indicator of future athlete success. Are you willing to be coached? Are you willing to be held accountable? All those things, the same things we've been talking about. But if I had to pick one quality and one characteristic, it's got to be consistency. Because if you're consistently putting in time training, you're also probably eating the right things. You're probably also consistently in the playbook. You're also consistently sleeping enough. Consistency should bleed over to all forms of life if that's true. That's why it's one of my core values. I want to be as consistent as possible. So for me, show me that consistent player. I'll show you someone that's probably going to have a great career.
Consistency, sleep, all the right habits. We haven't touched on nutrition much. If you can just give me a brief, overview, because everybody's different. Everybody has all the different things that their bodies react to. How early is too early to start eating well, and what does eating well really mean?
Yeah, I think it's got to be. I like how you said it's different for everybody because it is. It's a very individualized thing. And it's something that what's funny is everyone can be an expert with nutrition because there's so much information out there, right? So you can click on YouTube and everyone's talking about something different, the new diets, the new fads that are coming in and out. I think from a simplistic standpoint, you have to start there. Start simple. So you need the three macronutrients, you need adequate carbohydrates if you are an athlete. That need is going to change once again, off season to in season when you finish the season and you know you're not going to work out for a couple weeks and you're going into rest mode. Number one, I get it. Give yourself some grace. Like give yourself a couple cheat days where you can go ham a little bit, pun intended. But as you do that, go back and say, now I can't gain weight. This is a critical time. But we tell guys this when the season ends, don't gain weight because you're probably not exercising. Your body's going to try to go through this regeneration, but eat clean the majority of the week. Give yourself some grace a couple days but weigh yourself consistently. Once again, consistency. Weigh yourself, monitor your weight. Don't gain weight, but also don't lose 20 pounds either. I've had guys on that side. So as you approach your training, what we try to do as the season nears an end is give everyone kind of, hey, just a heads up when we meet, and I meet with every guy after the season, here's your 4-week plan, or you need to take 2 weeks off, and then we'll start with some of those ISOs and we'll start early. But nutritionally, don't gain weight. Don't lose a tremendous amount of weight. Give yourself some grace a couple days, but eat clean. You don't want to introduce a bunch of inflammation with bad food right now because we're trying to recover the joints. We're trying to recover everything that we just put the body through for the last 7 months. So keeping a simple approach. And then obviously as training picks up, you need to eat. We need guys that are fully fueled carbohydrate wise. We need guys that are eating adequate fats as well. Protein is one thing that research consistently shows number one for an athlete, but also just for human health, longevity, quality of life, not just length of life, but quality of life. We all needed to accumulate a large amount of protein because muscle mass and sustaining muscle mass later in life is what will help us increase that lifespan and health span. So quality of life, not just length. As we go into that protein, obviously from an athletic standpoint, if you're a 300 pounder, you need to consume a tremendous amount of protein, specifically when training levels spike up when we're training a lot, when we're in practice mode, all those things. And then hydration, I don't think hydration still gets enough credit or emphasis because everyone at some level is dehydrated. So for me, making sure that we're staying ahead on that hydration approach, those are some of the simplistic things. If you just do those simple things, you're going to be okay. If you just do those things, and then once again, just make sure you're not letting yourself go crazy as you approach daily life. Don't have 7 cheat days. Don't have 5 cheat days. Give yourself one. Be realistic with it, especially if you're trying to lose weight or improve your body fat composition. Be realistic and then make sure you're making good habits, good daily decisions that are consistent.
No, wonderful. I hope people can learn again what works for them and how to eat those clean meals on a regular basis. Because as you said, once it becomes a habit, it's not hard. It's not like you're trying to say, I can't eat these chicken fingers. You just don't think about them that much. So,
Yep.
what last question, and I like to throw them a little bit off the wall. What's the last thing that a player has asked you that made you laugh?
I'm trying to. I gotta have a clean version here. There's a lot. We have some good ones. I'm trying to think. Oh man. I've had a lot of guys ask me about my daily habits. I think that's some of the fun. Like to me, the funny one is, do you sleep? Bro, I love sleep. I have 3 kids. I don't get enough sleep. It gets a laugh out of me because I think athletes sometimes, Scott, you know this, you don't look at your coach in the same way as you do. Like that's not a fellow person. That's a coach. Oh, you're a robot. You just come in early. You guys are always here at 4 a.m. and you're always, the days I don't have to be, I'm not. I'm trying to sleep in. It's usually my kids waking me up, which is awesome. I love it, but I'm trying to sleep in. So I think humanizing it. Those are the funny questions I get because it's always like, oh, you don't think I'm human? What do I look like? You think I'm a robot? So I always get a laugh out of some of those random questions, like you don't live a normal daily life like they do too at certain points of the year.
Yeah, that's wonderful. My athletes ask if I ever have ice cream or cookies. They laugh.
Yep.
They're like, well, is that a cookie? And I'm like, yeah, come on, give me another one. Let's go. So
You
um
gotta feed the soul, Scott. You gotta feed the
gotta
soul.
feed the soul. Well, Ted, this has been phenomenal having you on. I really do appreciate it. The insights were unreal, very, very well practiced, and you can tell by the culture that you're in a part of at the Philadelphia Eagles that they're one, being led well. Two, there's a wonderful culture involved in that facility in that group. And three, you guys are willing to share that with other people. And you know, as long as people are willing to listen, helping others, it can make a difference in their lives. So thank you for that. And thank you for everything else that you've shared with us today.
No, Scott, thank you, man. Great questions. I really appreciate you, but I appreciate the time, appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, best of luck with everything you have coming forward, Ted. And do you have any social media? Do you have anything where people can follow you and kind of learn more about what you do on the inside of every day's practice?
Yeah, I do, and I'm trying to get a little bit more active. Kind of same thing. It's out of my comfort zone, Scott, but I'm trying to help people. Like it's a driving force. That's one of my core values. I want to be there. So I'm on all socials. Instagram's at Ted Rath Strength Coach, mostly LinkedIn, Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I'm on all of them. So you can find me at Ted Rath. So no, I appreciate it. I'm trying to post a little bit more to give people some of these snippets and some of these things because I think it's important. I listen to them. So if I can throw one or two out there that might help somebody, I feel better.
All right. Well, we'll see who gets the toes on the ground first tomorrow morning. But
I love
Ted
it.
Rath, thank you so much and have a great one.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate it.
Hey guys, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. If you liked this episode, then please go ahead, subscribe, like, or comment. This helps us grow more than you know, so we can keep making more content like this.
Or you can visit us on sportfuelslife.com and register to become a member for free. So you never miss another podcast episode. Thanks for listening.
Do it, you won't regret it.